All right. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. A little bit light in numbers here today. It is me. It's a Sunday morning, though, however. And let's see, let's let someone in here. Sunday morning, usually a little bit light on numbers on Sunday morning. And yesterday we had four of us. Today it looks like it's Crystal and myself, and maybe somebody else will join us. I am going to go ahead and hop into screen share and share some important things with you. First of all, first thing I want to share with you is that we have a Facebook group that is attached to what we're doing. And the Facebook group is called Daily Law of Attraction Training and Support with Coach Kevin. Again, that's Daily Law of Attraction Training and Support with Coach Kevin. And you can find it at facebook.com/groups/Daily Law of Attraction Training. And currently we are in a book called The Jackrabbit Factor. And hang on 1 second here. Okay, let me mute that. Okay, so we're in a book called The Jackrabbit Factor. It was actually written by a friend of mine. Her name is Leslie Householder. You can see the name here. This is the 8th revision, it looks like. You can get a copy for free. How can you do that? Just go ahead and Google Jackrabbit Factor ebook or Jackrabbit Factor PDF, free PDF. And there's places that will pop up where you can find it. That's where I found it. Yes, I have an actual copy of it because I was, this person's been a friend of mine since actually very late 2005. And we developed a strong relationship over 2006 and going forward. She is someone who I look up to in a sense because she's the one who put on a seminar. At the time, she was Bob Proctor's, one of his facilitators, and did one of the Science of Getting Rich seminars, and I happened to attend that. And the impact of that seminar plus the following 4 months of self-study into the material, and my income essentially, multiplied by, just depending on my month, I usually made $5 to $6 grand a month. My income jumped up to about 50 grand a month. So definitely the information is highly impactful from the Science of Getting Rich, from that seminar. I love that. I teach it myself. I have since become also a coach for Bob Proctor, and then now I've broken off and I do my own thing. But I've had the same type of training that Leslie had at the time to be able to use that material and share it with others. Anyhow, a little bit of an introduction. This book is written differently than most books, especially based on the law of attraction, because it's written in story form. It's fictional, but it's basically based on real life. And it has characters in the book that are given different names, and those names are given on purpose. There's kind of meaning to lots of the different names of the characters in the book. So what I recommend you do is you get a copy and catch on up with us, because we're over in chapter 6 right now. You can go back to the Facebook page, group I showed you, and that's where the actual chapters and these recordings are archived for you. But right now you can follow along on the screen or download one of your own and follow along. And I'm going to go ahead and hop on in and get going with this. So chapter 6, the insanity. Immediately coming from the hole in the grassy field, he heard the warning growl of an angry, agitated, wild dog. Oh, please, no. Sickened by the sudden rush of adrenaline, Richard froze. The dog snarled and leapt up out of the grass and landed again out of sight. After a tense moment of silence, it appeared again, barked, growled, and then darted one way and then the other in a crazed way. Richard relaxed just a bit as he realized the dog hadn't seen him after all, but decided to move cautiously down the road away from the rabid-looking beast. The wolf-like dog was undoubtedly insane. His mouth dripped with saliva, and his glowing yellow eyes had Richard entirely unnerved. But before Richard could move, he saw the dog was already headed straight for him. So he took off like a rocket. Panting, he ran as fast as he could and escaped into the field on the opposite side. He leaped dirt mounds and whipped through the tall brown grass. Stealing a brief glance behind him, he saw the dog approach within 10 feet and immediately dart away just as quickly. Richard pounded the dusty ground with his loafers as he slowed to a stop and tried to catch his breath. Leaning over with his hands on his knees and between gaps, he raised one eyebrow and squeaked out a breathy, "Huh?" Why did the dog turn around? Richard wondered in his mind. Is there something worse lurking somewhere? Nervously, Richard looked about and searched for hidden danger. There was nothing nearby that could have frightened the dog. Richard was absolutely stumped. The growling and barking continued, and the dog literally hopped from place to place in frenzy. That's it. The dog's insane. Returning to the road, Richard tiptoed along with a quicker pace and kept one eye on the dog for his own safety. In and out of the grass, the dog continued growling, foaming, and snarling back and forth, up and down. Poor dog, I wish someone would put it out of my misery. He chuckled at his witty thought, then proceeded cautiously down the path, feeling safer after determining that although the dog was crazy, it seemed harmless enough. As he turned from the dog, he thought about the visit from his father. He smiled to himself and relived the warmth of his father's genuine love. His moment of peace, however, was interrupted abruptly by the appearance of the same wacky dog, which had now stumbled out into the road immediately in front of him. The dog reestablished its footing and, with a rabbit in its mouth, glanced placidly at Richard and walked peacefully away into the grass on the other side of the road. Richard paused and cocked his head to one side. A rabbit? It was chasing a rabbit this whole time? He chuckled out loud at his misconception. The dog wasn't rabid, the dog wasn't crazy and it wasn't rabid. Richard recalled all the jumping and growling, the darting to and fro. He laughed at himself for being anxious and making such a judgment. Ooh, I'd like to have a rabbit too, someone spoke from behind. Richard turned around, taken aback by the sudden company. Yeah, a rabbit would be nice. Much better than all those peanut butter sandwiches, eh? My name's Richard. What's yours? Richard extended his hand to the small, round man now standing next to him with a 5 o'clock shadow and somewhat disheveled comb over. The man didn't break the stare he had fixed on the dog as it sauntered away, but politely replied, Harold Ashway. He exhaled slowly and sighed. I want one of those rabbits. Harold's face lacked expression. He seemed to be awestruck by the sheer memory of the prize. Without another word, the man stepped off the road into the sheaves of grass and jogged clumsily ahead about 40 feet. Then, with a wave of his hand and a smile in Richard's direction, he turned and began to leap around as if he was chasing some kind of elusive rabbit, except there was no rabbit. Richard squinted. What in the chickens is he doing? The man paused, scratched his head, and then got down on his hands and knees, whereupon he started darting around like an animal on all fours. And then to top it off, he actually started barking and growling, barking and snarling and jolting all over the place. The man carried on, and Richard's mouth dropped wide open. Oh my word. You've got to be kidding me. Richard tried his best to make sense out of the man's odd behavior. It was as though he was imitating the dog's actions without even seeing something to chase, thinking he would gain a rabbit by doing so. What was the barking at anyway? Does the fool think that copying a crazy dog is going to somehow produce a rabbit? Oh, please, there's no rabbit. And even if there was one out there somewhere, he'd be scaring it away. Harold Eshway, if you carry on like that. Richard paused when he caught sight of 3 or 4 jackrabbits right behind the man, frightened by all the commotion. The man was oblivious to them. He never even heard them scamper away, nor did he pay attention to Richard's exclamations. Richard attempted to hold back the laughter he felt rising in his chest, but failed to hold back the one massive grunt that escaped through his nose. Rubbing the back of his neck, he turned away to leave the man to his business. Just then, his father's voice returned to his mind. Know what you want, and when you find it, chase it. You'll know what to do. Richard began slowly walking down the path again, rehearsing his father's words and contemplating the ludicrous scene he had just witnessed. Then he thought about his brother, Victor. He remembered all those things people had said about him, how crazy he was, how he'd burned the candle at both ends, and how doing the same things never produced the same results for Richard. Richard stopped dead in his tracks. That last thought sunk into the deepest recesses of his soul, and he clapped his hand to his mouth. I was always trying to do what Victor did in order to get what he got. I've always tried to do what someone else did to get what they got. But it doesn't work that way, does it, Dad? I was actually scaring away any success that might have been nearby. Just doing what someone else has done is like copying the crazy dog, isn't it? Richard thought deeply about this new perspective. He thought about the way he should behave in order to get different results. It seemed so simple, philosophically at least. He realized that, first of all, he needed to be calm and confident. But how could he be confident when he had doubts about so many things? Well, he wasn't sure about that. He just knew that he needed to find a way. He knew that to catch a rabbit, he had to be calm, or they would detect him and disappear. He needed somehow to attract to him the thing that he wanted, because it was clear that busyness without focus would be a waste of time. What did he want? A rabbit would be nice, he thought. It would be something he could take home to his family, and they could make stew. That would be much better than all the sandwiches he'd found. He stopped off the path and sat down on an old, dried-up stump, scoping the area for any rabbits. Nothing. Opportunities all around me, huh? He began to feel cynical again. Shaking his head, he looked over his shoulder and studied the old road again. With a heavy sigh, he stood up and decided to speculate some more after gathering another sandwich. He needed the energy, after all. This thinking business was tough, exhausting stuff. He plodded along, and before he knew it, he was shoulder to shoulder with hundreds of men and women in search of brown paper sacks once again. But this time, all the crowds annoyed him more than ever. He knew better. He knew there was a way to leave the hordes in the mindless quest for mediocrity. Oliver Wendell Holmes, didn't he say that? A mind once stretched by a new idea never regains its original dimension. Now he understood why the sack race was so intolerable to him now. Never did that saying mean as much as it did now. He could not stand this way of life, knowing that something better was waiting for him. In fact, he was sure he hadn't noticed them before, but occasionally he spotted individuals out in the field, well off the beaten path, who strode along in the opposite direction. Each of them had an aura of confidence and hurried anticipation as they rushed alongside of, but against, the crowd. Where are they going? It didn't take long for Richard to deduce that they were on their way home to their families, because they each carried a captured rabbit. On top of that, behind them was gathering a small but growing handful of rabbits, appearing from nowhere, and following these people like the rats in the story of the Pied Piper. Richard nudged a man who was walking next to him. The man glanced over with a questioning look. Did you see that? Richard threw a thumb in the direction of the latest rabbit captor. See what? The people with the rabbits. Oh, them? Yeah. I notice those kinds of people every once in a while, and I swear they're so irritating. Irritating? Yeah, now and then they stop to get on the path right in front of me. No, serious. Why would they do that? I think they get a kick out of being annoying. They get in my face with all this talk about how I could have my own rabbit. The man chuckled. I mean, really, when would I ever have time to catch myself a rabbit with so much to do here on the path? I wish they'd just leave me alone. So what do you tell them? I tell them that they're full of baloney and to get out of my way. I've always known that if something sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Richard didn't say anything. He kept pace with the man and remained silent for a while. Finally, he had to know. What if they really could show us how to get a rabbit? Wouldn't you want one? Don't you have a family you could go back to if you had one? Oh, sure, I have a family, but it's my job to collect sandwiches until I retire. I've only got about 20 years left of this. That thought was painful to Richard. Wouldn't you want a rabbit? Oh, see, that's just too good to be true. I could never get a rabbit. In fact, I don't think I'm supposed to have one anyway. Why is that? God said I can't go to heaven if I get a rabbit. What? What are you talking about? He said rabbits are the root of all evil. No, he didn't. Oh, yes, he did. And if you'll excuse me, the man became nervous and hurried away from Richard. The root of all evil? Richard whispered to himself. Richard attempted to run the man's logic through his own head. Here was a man planning to spend the next 20 years away from his family, with most of that time in pursuit of little brown paper sacks because it was taboo to find a rabbit. So, was it wrong? Was he on some forbidden quest that would alienate him from the source of all good? He didn't want a rabbit for the sake of having a rabbit. He wanted one because it'd make it possible for him to return with complete focus to his family. Looking at the panorama of individuals in perpetual search for sandwich after sandwich, Richard couldn't help but wonder what was going on in the lives of their families back home. Did they have any idea what they were missing? Do I have any idea what I am missing? What would it be like to be a room parent at school in Matthew's class next year? I wonder what a room parent does anyway. And then there's Felicity. Wouldn't my marriage thrive and grow like never before if I had the time, means, and freedom to continue developing that relationship the way I really want? If my family is the most important thing to me, am I spending most of my time developing those relationships? No. I'm spending all of my time looking for stupid sandwiches in dad blasted paper sacks. Richard suddenly yelled out loud, the root of all evil? I just want to go home. I just want a rabbit so I can finally be home. Was that so wrong? Maybe so. Maybe he was supposed to engage in the sack race his whole life, if for no other reason than to build his character. After all, that's what everybody else does. Stick with the program. Don't deviate. Do what you're told and you'll succeed. A little bit of fear spread over him as he spotted a sack and numbly picked it up. He decided to put the whole rabbit idea away for a while. It was too conflicting and frankly a nagging nuisance. He knew that was what he wanted, but there was too much of a mental wrestle to try and do anything about it. The crowds of people around him became thicker. Pretty soon he couldn't move without bumping someone. He was in a veritable footpath traffic jam. Richard groaned inside as he came to terms with the fact that unless he chose to think differently from the crowd, he would only drown in the floods of mediocrity and probably perish from conscious awareness of his own failure to achieve his dream. Would he miss the chance to enjoy watching Matthew grow up? How long would his wife keep holding on to the hope that he'll one day accomplish what he set out to do? The thought of disappointing Felicity was more than he could bear. He stopped abruptly and realized that it was too late for him to ever be satisfied with keeping step with the crowds. He closed his eyes and held still. For a short time, he was bumped over and over from the masses, then pressed on. Once in a while, The blow was so abrupt and forceful that it almost knocked him over, but he didn't flinch. He envisioned his wife smiling at him and his little Matthew running to jump into his arms. These were the images that brought him joy. He could hear Felicity saying, "Oh, honey, you did it. I knew we could count on you." With his eyes still closed, he relished her adoration and could feel the joy that swelled up inside from reuniting him with his loved ones. And the crowds were gone. Let's see, what do we got for time? I'm going to keep going and do another chapter. Hopefully you'll stick with me. The tragedy. Silently, Felicity felt her mind slip into a fog. This wasn't going right. She had very real concerns, and who could she turn to if the police weren't going to take her seriously? They just glared at her. What could she do? She couldn't even speak to them without feeling like a fool. Whether or not my fears are justified, I deserve, at the very least, an empathetic ear. Who's going to help me? Who'll listen to me and convince me that everything is okay? Who'll change the way I feel? Who'll save me from this nightmare? Exhaling forcefully, Officer Cross displayed his impatience. "Ma'am, if you're not going to talk to me, there isn't a whole lot I can do for you. If you're not going to treat me with some respect, then I'm not going to talk to you." So what is it going to be? Cross glowered at Felicity with his eyes half closed and his eyebrows raised high. He glanced at his junior partner, who stood apprehensively near the wall. The young Officer Doolittle seemed to want to say something to break the tension, but showing Felicity any compassion at this point would be undermining the arrogant superior and would undoubtedly be met later with a reprimand. Still refusing to respond, Felicity looked at the floor defiantly and prayed for some kind of advocate to save her from the humiliation she felt growing inside. Cross knew what would change the stalemate. "Perhaps you know exactly where your husband is, and you just don't want to tell us what happened. Is that it?" Felicity finally looked up, incredulous. Cross stared her down, searching for any hint of guilt in her response. She crumpled her eyebrows, closed her eyes, and shook her head, whispering, "This can't be happening to me." Chapter 8, The Difference. Richard opened his eyes and saw that the group had vanished. He turned around, looking to see where they had gone, but they were nowhere to be seen. Whoa, Richard thought, that was easy. He took mental note that if he ever felt crowded among the masses with mediocre minds, he needed only to close his eyes and imagine what he wanted. And most importantly, imagine the feelings that would go with it. He guessed that most people would never take the time to really do that. He noticed a sack at his feet. With a new attitude toward it, realizing it wasn't his ultimate goal, he nevertheless felt a degree of reverent gratitude that it was there. He looked heavenward and thought, "Thank you for this. It gives me the energy I need to pursue my goal." He reached down, picked it up, and carefully pulled it open. Smiling, he pushed aside the time card and pulled out a triple-decker sandwich. A voice inside his head spoke to him. "Ah, you keep on this path, and the sandwiches will just get bigger and bigger. See, all you need is patience and persistence, and you'll get all that you need right here on this path." In the forest where Richard slept, the serpent lifted its head and quietly loomed over him. Suddenly, a thin twig cracked and fell, dropping the baleful creature next to his arm. He crept up his sleeve and then seemed settled onto his chest. It remained poised, hovering over his shirt pocket, blazing at Richard's face. In his dream, Richard paused to think. He looked down the path as if to somehow determine whether the voice was telling the truth. Would he really find all he needed along this road? But instead of seeing sacks, he began to see people again. No, that's just what everyone else thinks. I need to think differently than the others. I have to think differently. It bothered him a little that he wasn't alone on the path anymore. He felt like he must be slipping into popular mentality for them to show up like they did. He closed his eyes again and imagined his family. Thought about standing near his back porch in the thick, cool green turf and picking up Matthew and twirling him in the air. He saw the trees zoom past behind his son as Matthew giggled and thrust his head back in sheer delight. Even with his eyes closed, Richard's thoughts put a real smile on his face. And upon opening his eyes again, he found himself completely alone. There. Now, where was I? He stepped off the path and sat on an outcropping of rocks about 10 feet from the road. He was consciously aware that thinking and feeling the happy images actually set himself apart from the crowds. Now he began to wonder what it might be that he should do next to get a rabbit. Use my thoughts, huh, Dad? I wonder what he meant by that. He closed his eyes and imagined the rabbit in front of him. Richard found this difficult, as he wasn't good at keeping his thoughts from darting all over the place. But he managed to see in his mind an outline of a small gray animal with tall ears. The shape of the creature was sort of abstract for the brief moment that it was the dominant image. It seemed dark all around and almost like a watermark, nothing more. But he did hear a rustle. Richard opened his eyes and looked out into the distant field. He was certain he saw the tall grass move in one particular spot. All of the grass was swaying in the mild breeze, but in one place something seemed to be hiding. He stood up cautiously and saw it, a small animal with two long ears, far away and somewhat vague. But he saw it. He fixed his eyes on the animal and slowly, vigilantly approached it. It was impossible to move through the grass without making noise, so it wasn't long before the rabbit looked his way and immediately darted toward the woods at the edge of the field. Ah, there's no way I'm going to be fast enough to catch a rabbit like that. Richard threw his hands up and let them fall to his side. He moaned and returned to his perch on the rocks. He looked back at the path, feeling a little lonely. There's nobody out here. At least the path never lacked company when you wanted some, he shouted out loud. At least I wasn't alone in my misery. Richard moped for a while. Finally, he muttered to himself, what am I doing? Who do I think I am anyway? I'm no victor. I don't know how to do this. He looked up just in time to see a smiling man holding a rabbit by its ears. Lifting it up, he greeted Richard as he passed by, about 30 feet away, well off the worn-out path. The voice in his head spoke up. Oh, would you look at that show-off? What a jerk. He's just rubbing it in your face that you don't have a rabbit. But Richard reserved judgment. He acknowledged the impish voice, but he wasn't choosing to believe it. Not yet. Richard waved his hand to return the greeting and forced a smile. The man jerked his head to one side, a gesture that invited Richard to come along. Richard glanced around to determine if the invitation was truly for him or intended for someone else. When he saw no one else around, he shrugged and stood up to join the rabbit man. Something about him was magnetic. He seemed so self-assured, so at peace with himself, so directed. Richard wanted to be like that. He wanted to know what the man knew. He wanted to know how to catch a rabbit. Good day, the rabbit man greeted. Good day, Richard responded. I saw you sitting in the field and thought you might be interested in having a little chat. How did you know? Richard was puzzled at the man's intuition. Because I was just like you only a little while ago. It's my guess that you stepped off the path in search of a rabbit. Am I right? Richard nodded, and his eyes lit up because it seemed that the man was about to reveal a profound secret. You know what? You're right. I've been on a heck of a journey, and so far I figured it out. I have to visualize what I want and feel what it would be like to have it. The strangest things keep happening. I know that I want to be with my family, and each time I think about that and feel the feelings that go with it, all the people around me just vanish. That's because you set yourself apart from the masses. Most people wish for a rabbit or say how nice it would be to get off the path, but only a rare few ever take the time to visualize doing it. How does visualizing help? Doesn't it just sort of act as a mental rehearsal so that I'm not so afraid to take the necessary steps? The man shook his head and grinned, as though he was about to share the most priceless secret of all. Oh, no, it's so much more than that. The man paused and Richard leaned in. baited and waiting for more. The man looked intently at Richard and then seemed to change the subject. What's your name? Richard Goodman. Good to meet you. I'm Andrew, but you can call me Andy. Andy's off. You got anything to eat? Well, what? Yeah. At part of a sandwich, Richard became guarded. Why? He asked with inflection of obvious suspicion. Oh, never mind. I'm going to excuse myself to get some lunch. Maybe I'll see you around. The man politely tipped his head and turned away with a look in his eyes that said he was torturing poor Richard on purpose. Now, wait a minute. Richard was about to let the man get away precisely at the moment he was to discover the secret. The man turned around with a look of question on his face. Weren't you going to tell me how visualizing helps? Well, yeah, perhaps, but it's lunchtime and I intend to eat now. The man was frank but kind. Okay, fine. If I give you the rest of my sandwich, will you stay and teach me what you know, please? Richard felt an urgency to seize the opportunity for knowledge, even if doing so meant he had to abandon all pride. He didn't know if anyone else with this man's experience would ever bother to come along and give him priceless knowledge he so desperately sought. Andy smiled and accepted the sandwich as Richard eagerly offered it in his outstretched hand. Granted, it was all that Richard owned. Would he ever be able to replace it? He thought of the men that fiercely competed for the one measly sack on the path when so many others lay around unnoticed. He knew there were other sacks, more so than some people realized. Trusting that the wisdom would be worth the price, he put away any concerns about being able to get another sandwich. He'd simply go find one, expecting it to be there when he needed it. The man ate Richard's food and motioned for him to sit down with him to continue their conversation. Contrary to what you may think, visualizing isn't just for generating courage. The man spoke very deliberately now. Picturing a favorable circumstance in your head literally causes unseen things to happen in mysterious ways. He paused and searched Richard's face for signs of belief or skepticism. Seeing only wide-eyed curiosity, he proceeded, actually, some terribly misleading rumors are circulating among the paper sack collectors. They say that to leave the path, one must have a big enough dream to do so. The problem is that the people think that means they need to have a big enough dream to give them the motivation to do nearly superhuman things. Richard was nodding, for that was a perspective he had encountered himself. But in actuality, it is the dream itself, passionate thoughts of what they want that emanate from their minds like radio waves and which go out into the universe, causing astonishing things to happen on their behalf. The man's voice showed excitement, as if every time he thought about it, it was just as amazing as when he learned it for the first time. In other words, if you get excited about holding a rabbit by the ears in your hands, rabbits will literally begin to approach you merely by your thoughts. By thoughts, they are drawn to you. By action, you receive them. You're telling me that my thoughts make things happen that I can't see? I don't mean to be thick-headed here, but what are you talking about? What kind of thoughts? The man answered, it's so incredibly simple. You've got to have gratitude for your present conditions, no matter what they are, because it is the lessons of the present that prepare you for the blessings of the future. Have grateful thoughts for your current situation. Also, you've got to have thoughts of how you feel when you reach your goal. He added, thoughts of trust are vital. 2, trust that a higher power is guiding you to find and catch your rabbit. And most importantly, you must have thoughts of belief that there is a way, no matter what kind of obstacles may appear. These thoughts are all invisible, but powerful little packages that go out and do for you many things you can't do for yourself. So I have to be grateful even though I don't have a rabbit, Richard reiterated. Yes, be genuinely grateful the way things are, and then be truly grateful for how things will be. You see, to be grateful for something before it has been accomplished is faith. and faith can move mountains. So all those people who have rabbits just think differently than the rest of us. I thought they were just faster, stronger, or smarter. No, for the most part, they're just like everyone else. Richard wasn't quite convinced. Pointing toward a few of the folks in the distance who had rabbits, he said, but it comes so naturally to them. Every successful person I've ever known was self-confident. I've never seen them show any doubt. It's like they were born or raised that way. Me, on the other hand, I would really have to struggle to think that way consistently enough. It'd be so unnatural. The rabbit man grinned and nodded his head understandingly. Yes, it could take some practice. But truthfully, most of those people with rabbits had to develop the thought discipline too, just like you. He chuckled. You know, you're not the only one that is mistakenly deduced by observation that the winners are somehow more gifted than the rest. Isn't it ironic that the people without rabbits have all figured out what it takes to get one? Richard agreed. Like the confused man I saw who thought he'd catch a rabbit by jumping around like a dog. Oh, you're kidding, right? No, I'm not. Andy rolled his eyes. I wish people would just learn how to think differently. If they would just learn how to think like a winner, they'd win. I'd tell them to see the rabbit vividly before launching a full-blown attack, for crying out loud. I mean, that's just common sense. And I'd tell them, don't make excuses. Winners don't make excuses, period. Richard, in case you haven't noticed, excuses are epidemic out there on the path. Show me a person with an excuse, and I'll show you a winner determined to succeed in spite of the same or worse circumstances. Nobody has an obstacle so great that there is not a way prepared for that person to succeed. That's a promise. He paused as he searched Richard's face for understanding. Richard spoke up, cautious not to sound like he was trying to make excuses. Certainly there are times when a task is truly impossible. I mean, you'll never see a really old man place first in a triathlon, will you? With a slight grin, the man raised his eyebrows, blinked slowly, and shrugged his shoulders. I've learned to never say never. I've also learned that if I believe I can't do something under certain conditions, somewhere in the billions of people on this planet, someone exists who would do it anyway. So I figure, why not me? And if that were my dream, to win a triathlon as an old man, and if I could believe it, then it would be possible. But I'd need a pretty altruistic reason to do such a thing, and the desire would have to be intensely passionate. I'm sure that in the history of mankind, many old men have done impossibly physical tasks, equivalent to a triathlon, perhaps because their life depended on it. Miracles do happen. I just don't understand how a person can do something remarkable if they don't already have what it takes. I'll be honest, most people can't achieve their dreams as they are, but people can change. Success comes when a person submits to change, but it isn't the kind of change that you'd suspect. See, although a person might not have all that he needs to make something happen immediately, he certainly has all he needs to get started, and that's all that matters. If they picture themselves successful and feel the victory as though it were real, and believe that somehow there will be a way, then they can expect it. They must expect it. Then when they go as far as they can go and reach what appears to be a roadblock, that is where they must expect to find the way around it. Finally, Richard got it. He nodded, but now he wanted some specific advice about his own personal state of affairs. Okay, with that said, all I want is to provide for my family and spend my days enjoying their company. I don't want to spend my whole life in the sack race. Do you know how you're going to do that? I have no idea, but I believe that catching a rabbit will help. Okay, then, it's simple. You need to write it down and know that the mere act of doing so causes unseen things to happen for your benefit. I need to write it down. What good does that do? Well, it's funny. Visualization alone accomplishes a great many things, but it is a beautiful thing to commit a goal to paper and know that writing it down is just like submitting a request to the master chef. Since there's no waitress here, you have to put in your own order. When the dream comes just as you ordered, you can know for certain that the master provided it, and he loves the recognition. When you only imagine it and it comes true, there's a question of whether or not it was just a strange coincidence. You got to be kidding. You mean you write down what you want and it comes? Basically, yes. But there's more to it than that. Like what? Richard's curiosity was piqued. Well, let me ask you something. If I were to go back to the path and tell everyone that all they needed to do was take time to write down exactly what they wanted and it would come true, what do you think they would say? Richard chuckled. I know what one of them would say, at least. He would tell you how annoying you are. Andy laughed. Yeah, I've heard that one. What do you think they would do if you told them to write down what they want? Well, I doubt they'd do anything. And even if they did write it down, I doubt they would believe it would work. You're right. In fact, approximately 3% of the population take it seriously. And it's no surprise that about 3% are able to get rabbits to come to them. No kidding. No, I'm not. See, the whole key is belief. People are used to believing only in what they can see or detect with their senses. The 3% consciously choose to believe in something they create in their own mind. You are not presently with your family, but each time you close your eyes to imagine and feel their happy reunion, circumstances are literally changing. Rabbits are actually approaching. Do that often enough, believing with no reservations that it is already true, and it will happen by law. Law? Laws of thought. There are laws of thought? What in the world does that mean? Richard's brows were furrowed, and his eyes were wide. Well, just like gravity is a law of nature, so are there laws related to how our thoughts affect our circumstances. And like gravity, we don't have to understand it or believe in it to be affected by it 100%. You mean I've been governed by laws of thought my whole life and never even knew it? Exactly. Not very many people have discovered that their own thoughts significantly affect their circumstances, but those that have discovered it have found that the knowledge can be a great advantage to them. As they believe on purpose, the things they need are drawn to them. But when they let themselves doubt, things are drawn away from them. This is how it works with absolutely everybody. But what do you think the problem is? Why don't you think it's obvious to everyone? Andy wanted Richard to draw the conclusion himself. Well, Richard thought, we think hundreds of things every day and never see evidence of them having any effect on anything. But they do. They really, really do. Richard thought silently for a time. Finally, he said, I suppose our circumstances seem random because we don't hold on to one thought long enough to see it happen. We talk ourselves out of ideas. We believe, then we doubt. We believe, then we doubt, right? Andy replied, you got it. It's like a cosmic dance. All that we could ever need is all around us. There is plenty for everyone. And if it ever ran out, more would be created. As we believe it's coming to us, it does. When we believe that we lack, it's drawn back. The dance. One step forward, it's on its way. One step back, and it steps back as well. So, disbelief in the norm, because all of this is happening in an invisible way, we never see the dance. So we have no idea that we're having any effect on it. Richard was energized. This knowledge was giving him confidence that he never had before. And he could see the lights going on in Richard's eyes, and he smiled. Think of it this way. A tree seed that gets planted in the earth does not have to scramble around searching for bark particles or leaf molecules, does it? Does it worry that it might not find what it needs? Richard chuckled. Of course not. You're right. We can learn a lot from God through his creations in nature. No, the seed doesn't even have to look very far. It just remains still, and all that it needs is naturally drawn to it. In God's words, be still and know that I am. Remembering something that he had been taught as a child, Richard added, consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They toil not, but never was a king arrayed quite as well as one of these. Andy simply smiled. I butchered that one, didn't I? I don't remember exactly how it goes. You get the idea, though, he continued. If we think of our idea like a seed and plant it in our minds and nourish it with belief and gratitude, then all that we need to accomplish the idea is drawn to us just as naturally as elements to the lilies. Sheesh, that makes so much sense. I love to see people finally get it. I used to try and tell everyone on the path how simple it was to have all their needs met, but they were suspicious and talked illogically. How do you mean? Richard was curious. Oh, I'd tell them they could go home to their family if they caught a rabbit, and they'd say they would if they had one, but since they didn't, they were trapped on the path. I'd tell them they could catch a rabbit if they learned how, and they'd say they knew someone who tried it before and failed. I'd tell them there's a better way, and they'd say they heard it all before. I got weary of trying to explain it. Ironic, isn't it? Well, wow. I guess someone has to really want it before the answer will do them any good, huh? That's what I've learned. Usually I just stop trying if they give me an excuse, 2 or 3 times in a row. No reason to waste the answers on someone who isn't asking the questions. It's like being a store clerk and handing a bathroom key to each and every customer who comes along saying, here, the restroom is down the second aisle, and then turn left. It will be at the end of the hall. Here, take the key. Take it. What do you mean you don't need it? Who wouldn't want to use the bathroom? Andy held a pretend key in one hand and shook it in front of Richard's face, while Richard swatted at it with his hand like it was a fly. Andy continued, I've learned it's a timing thing. The information simply isn't useful to everyone who comes along. Some come in for a soda or a newspaper with no intentions of using a restroom. And in fact, when someone comes along who wants the restroom key, you certainly don't have to talk them into taking it. After all, only a relatively small number of people are looking for what you have. And you know what? That's okay. Thinking about the hordes of people crowding the path, Richard suggested, it's my guess there's a lot more than just 3% who want a rabbit. Wouldn't you agree? Yeah, I do. But not that many think they've got to change the way they think before they'll ever get one. Too many of them wish for a rabbit, hoping one might come their way out of sheer luck. Andy grinned. Suddenly he had an idea. Follow me, I want to show you something. Richard and Andy hurried to catch up with the people who were walking along with rabbits in their hands. The man conferred with a few of them secretly for a moment, and one of them threw his head back in laughter. Each of them smiled in turn, and then they all nodded their heads. Andy turned again to Richard and said, I'd like you to meet some of my friends here, Colin O'Hare, Evan Yukon, and Kerry Morgan. Guys, this is Richard Goodman. Now let's take a little trip back to the path. You got to see this. Returning to the old road, Richard glanced over his shoulder and politely nodded his head to the 3 strangers, extremely curious about what was going to happen next. Chapter 9, the giveaway. Okay, we are going to call it done for today. Any questions or comments, Crystal, before we go?
Yeah, I just have a quick comment. I think it was it could have been chapter 6 or 7, where Richard talks about, I think the Bible referring to, I don't know if the Bible ever said that, the money is the root of all evil.
Right, with the rabbits.
Right, with the rabbits, right. So the rabbits is referring to money, I'm thinking, Yeah, so, and it also, I guess people get that from the Bible, as far as there was like a passage where I think there was I think Jesus had said that it was hard for a rich man to get into heaven, I think, to give up all his goods and follow me. So maybe this is what people interpret it to be.
There's one individual out there, that he's talking to. So he's not talking to everybody, but that particular person, right? We take everything, there's programming that's gone on in our minds for years. We've been programmed, and we've been shown by others their opinions, right? And eventually we accept them as our own subconsciously, and what we've got to do now is recognize that, hey, you know what? All this stuff that our subconscious thinks is normal is actually the opposite of normal. And the masses are doing what they feel is normal, and therefore that's why they keep getting what they're getting. And this book, what I really like about it in the story format is, one, it's very visual, in the way it's descriptions, but it also gives you a chance to look at it kind of from the outside and laugh about what's going on, because you can see kind of like he's starting to see, going, this is ridiculous, what's happening out here. And have you gone back to the beginning of the book yet, or have you?
I know. Well, I just kind of joined your morning session, so I'm gonna have to probably download the book and start reading from chapter 1, I guess, all the way to, I guess you're up to chapter 9. So I'm gonna have to catch up. So I haven't even began reading the beginning to see what the whole, it
keeps building and building and building. So, and you could either go, well, obviously, go download it, get it for free, but also the recordings for this book are all in the group. So if you're not
great.
in that group, go join it. If you are in the group, you should be able to find it, because I usually do anywhere from, depends on the length of the chapters, a couple a day to maybe 2 or 3 a day. So
awesome.
So
so I guess with the Bible, it was just referring to that individual person. It wasn't talking about in general of rich people.
Well,
in the relationship with God.
Right. Well, here's the other thing too. Here's what we see, okay? There's competitive, if you go back to, have you been around at all when I've read The Science of Getting Rich?
I kind of been around a little bit, not too much. No, so I have to read that as well. So I know you're working on chapter 1, so I'm just like, I know I started the course, so I'm pretty much going to do chapter 1.
Perfect. So the Science of Getting Rich tells people ultimately there's 2 ways that people can go about getting rich. One of them is being competitive, but kind of like what Richard's talking about in this book. It's nearly impossible to win that way. And even if you do, you're always afraid of losing it again. So ultimately you do. And you can never stay on top forever. I'm watching, the NBA games right now.
Right.
And when all's said and done, the winner this year, so let's pretend LeBron James wins with the Lakers this year. LeBron's not going to be number 1 for the next 20 years.
No.
It just won't be, right? So in a competitive sense, you can compete and you can be the champion, but there's going to come a point in time where if you live your life that way, you're not going to win anymore. But if you build your life, create it, I'm not saying it's not creative, okay? But when you're attracting things into your life on the creative plane, there's no fear of loss, because the way you're doing it isn't really through much of your own action. You have to use action to receive it, but it's your thoughts that attract it. Well, as long as you're able to think for the rest of your life, you're going to be able to attract what you want into your life. So you don't have that fear. The people out there that are competitive are afraid of losing and giving up what they've got. The people that are creative are like, okay, here you go, take it, because I'll just, I'll attract it back anyway. So that rich person in the Bible was more on the competitive plane. So if you think of money that way, as a scarce thing, and you have to fight to get it and keep it and everything else, God asks you not to make it your God, because it's not the love of money, or it's not money's the root of all evil. It was the love of money. And really what I would call it is the worship of money, meaning you make money your God so you don't have to rely on God.
Okay, so this person he was referring to in the Bible was basically this type of person, I guess, competitive, and this is the way he lived his life, trying to hold on.
Well, he kind of went to Jesus and said, hey, look, I've done all these cool things. I go to church, I do this, I do that, I do this, I do that. What else do I got to do? And he's like, sell all that you have, give to the poor, and come follow me. And it's like, and he walked away sad because he was rich. Well, okay, but if he had recognized where the wealth had come from in the first place, he wouldn't have worried about it.
Of just releasing it, you're saying?
Yeah, well, done what Jesus had said, he would have still been taken care of and taken care of just fine.
Right.
But he didn't believe it. His belief was in the money that he had more than it was in God.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it wasn't necessarily wealth itself.
No.
Okay.
It It was the love of it. And again, substitute worship of it, making it your God versus letting God be your God.
Right. Okay.
And seeing God as your source of supply. You know, and then you can have all the money that you want because you're going to recognize where it came from, be grateful for it, and you're even going to ask, you know, God, hey, how should I go about using it?
Right. Okay. Yeah, I always question that because there's always been a topic among people in general, and they refer to the Bible, you know, with rich and the wealth, or they're selfish, or this or that, you know. So, you know, and that kind of programs in people's mind.
Absolutely. Well, and me
you
too.
Know,
it did to me for
right.
for a long time.
Right.
To recognize that. Hold on a second. What are we really talking about here?
Right.
What's really going on? Who was God talking to? What was going on? And you know, why do things be said that way? Well, if you believe in God, then you got to believe there's an opposite. There's an opposite to everything, right? I mean, some people believe in God, some don't, but or good and evil, right? Well, just think how much time, energy we waste on worrying about money versus being able to help the world because it's on our minds so much. So if the adversary can keep us so focused on money, but in a negative way, so first of all, we don't get it because we're thinking of it negatively. And then secondly, we're putting so much time, energy, and effort into worrying about it. It keeps our energy from focusing on doing things that make life better.
Okay. To actually produce that money, to think creatively,
and to serve other people.
And to serve other people and to help other people.
Yeah, we don't have the energy if all of our energy is focused on lack. How do we pass on to others abundance?
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me.
Thank you. Yes, and you have another one tomorrow, right?
I guess every day.
And then your regular
Tuesday night.
Tuesday night. Yes. Okay, great. Okay, so I'll see you tomorrow.
All right. Thanks, Crystal.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.